Hello, everybody. There we go. We got a little rhythm going. Okay. It's time for some Death Stranding. Uh, I don't know who's in the chat right now, but let's hope you're all cool people. Make sure my phone doesn't die while I'm managing the dashboard here. Okay. So ignore that. Earlier today, I sent out a poll asking people, like what would you want to see? Would you guys want to see cutscenes or not? And I said, hey, no. I asked the question. People seem to favor cutscenes, um, so I'm gonna go with cutscenes. But now that we have viewers, let me know if you want it. Obviously, the people watching now have priority over people who just voted on Twitter. So I'm gonna start a new game. I'm gonna go with cutscenes. If people feel like they want to switch it up and skip stuff, because there are gonna be a lot of cutscenes, so it could make up the majority of the stream. Uh, so. Hmm. I'll be fine, whatever. Let's go with normal. Start the game at the selected difficulty. So I will say, for what it's worth, I don't think Death Stranding is super hard on any difficulty. Maybe, well, to be fair, I haven't played hard, so maybe it is way harder and hard. But yeah, I don't know that's super relevant as like a consideration if you're playing. I would definitely, like, I didn't really have that many problems, so. Yeah, let me know what you want to see. Let me know if you have any questions. Gonna turn up the brightness a little higher than usual just in case. So this is a weird thing, is that like I never really saw what this does. Since I was born in on January 20th, but I want to say, what is it, like 4, yeah, 420. Uh yeah, sure. So yeah, it's Cancers, Pisces, Cestus, Delphinus, and Gigas. I don't know if that's actually relevant at all, if it's just like a weird trick, but yeah, something weird that you might want to keep in mind. But I don't know how that factors into gameplay, to be sure. Uh, just so you're aware, this isn't, not to spoil anything, but this is like the movie studio's logo, not the actual movie studio. Kojima Productions' logo. This isn't actually part of the story. But it's so cool that they do this. It's a really neat touch. The rope, along with the stick, are two of mankind's oldest tools. The stick to keep the bad away, the rope used to bring the good towards us. They were our first friends of our own invention. I did not have time to read the rest of the quote.
Once there was an explosion. A bang which gave birth to time and space.
I mean, this was already in the
Once
trailer,
there was
right?
an explosion. A bang which set a planet spinning in that space. Once there was an explosion. A bang which gave rise to life as we know it. And then came the next explosion. Rain, here it goes.
This intro sequence is one of my favorite parts of this game, honestly.
To understand and know, play my tricks, fret your mind.
I will say quite a bit of it because we've decided not to skip. Unless people want to skip stuff like this and just want to see the game itself. Quite a bit of it will be cutscenes.
mistake. Don't be so serious. Don't be so serious. Don't be so serious. Don't be so serious.
AFC Jack 2 says, Red Dead Redemption 2 felt almost too long for me. Do you think this game is just long enough? You can definitely make it way longer than it should be, but a lot of that depends on how many side missions you tackle. And I would advise, you almost don't really need to take on a whole bunch of them. I would say that for the most part, you're kind of fine, like the getting experience and resources and stuff from outposts almost ends up being like irrelevant. It doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like it's a huge factor. So I would feel like I'd be interested in seeing what the effects are, because I definitely did a lot of side stuff, and I ended up playing for about 40-50 hours, because the game's in-game tracker is like really bad. But you can definitely make it a lot shorter than that if you take on missions. That said, it'll still be a while. Like I could see like even an expedited run being like 30 hours. So. Will this be spoiler free a la Atlas with Persona 5? Well, it's just the first hour, so not a ton of major spoilers in the first hour. If anything, this is mostly a lot of stuff you see in trailers, so. Yeah, I was, not to go too much spoilers. But it was definitely interesting seeing like, oh, you have to talk around it, don't talk about it. But it's the thing that I was dying to tell Kyle, because he was one of the people who was most reticent to do it, to like talk spoilers. That there isn't a ton of spoil systems wise, and I'm not the type of person who's gonna tell you like the ending first thing as my first conversation. This is my most anticipated Let's Play watch of the year, I think. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's one of the reasons I did pose the question of skipping stuff is because so much of it is going to be cutscenes, and I do want to show off the gameplay, which I think is the most interesting part. And I hope the audio is such that you guys are getting enough of the game. I'm going to turn it up just in case. So, yeah. I mentioned it on the MinMax show, which went live for Patreon late last night. But this, I think Metal Gear Solid 5 is like a good starting point for what you can expect. Can you change those slick tires for something more enduro? Not really. I think the bikes are the bikes. I will say, Scorch, you mentioned that you're in it more for the story than the cutscene, or than the gameplay. I will say though, this is more like Metal Gear Solid 5 in that you will, if that's where you're coming from, you'll have to see a lot of gameplay between cutscenes. So something to keep in mind if you're thinking about picking it up, because I know reactions to this game have been more divisive than probably expected. Right now, you're not really seeing a whole lot of it, but I think to me my favorite part of the game is the way you traverse through stuff. It strikes a really nice balance between being arcadey and like that. You see that how I had like a lot of momentum going downhill, right? I do like that a lot about the game. So I could have pressed the triggers to slow down, or just let myself fall over, right? And you can hold the button down to climb. Like right there, I didn't really do much with the stick. You know, that whole time I was like right after I stumbled, I wasn't pressing forward on the stick. It's just a matter of like I had been moving so the game said, okay, well, you have to move the rest of the way, right? Because that's what momentum is. What's the cutscenes gameplay ratio? Lower. I would say the ratio of cutscenes to gameplay is probably lower than MGS2. And I think at first, one thing to point out is that at first I was kind of like, I don't know that you need all this celebrity. It definitely felt like Kojima was just saying, I have so much money, I'm gonna use the celebrities that I like to play all the different roles, and that's still the case, right? But you know, I got used to that, so I had fun with that. Like this deer, this very famous deer that everybody knows. This game is visually gorgeous. Yeah, that's one of the, you know, that's one of the most outstanding things about it. You know, when you watch trailers and stuff, is how good it looks. Yeah, Norman Reedus is pretty handsome. I think he's pretty like scruffy. I think he's like usually super dirty in Walking Dead, right? So this I feel does him a little bit more of a service, even though he's usually dirty and mostly clothed here. Hey Adam Walker, Texas Ranger. Thanks for hanging on to the chat. Like the way the game renders skin is really good. You know, obviously it's building off of the Decima engine, but you know, it doesn't. I wouldn't necessarily say like, oh, this looks like Horizon Zero Dawn. You definitely see a lot of the Fox, kind of their expertise with the Fox engine shown off here. First time I was really impressed by faces in this. Yeah, that definitely felt like the first game that I'd seen that was that felt like it built on LA Noire, which I still think is like one of my favorite games for facial expression. Do you think the game could have been served better as a shorter game? 40 to 60 hours seems so long for this. This is Chris Koshan. Yeah, I think it could have been served a little bit better as a shorter game, but you can make it a shorter game like I mentioned earlier. It's just that it does feel so tied to the need to be an open world game and taking advantage of its super large land masses. And so like the thing you want to do as a developer, I would imagine, is like if you have a really gorgeous backdrop, you know, a really gorgeous locale for which your character can explore, you want to use that as much as possible. So they made a bunch of missions that you can go back and forth between different locations. But I think this is a game that I think suffers a lot from repetition more than other games, because it's not like Borderlands where it's like, oh, the shooting is fun, so the more you do that, the more it's fun. I think a lot of the interesting parts of Death Stranding are the ways that are, you know, traveling to this place for the first time and having to overcome a new challenge. And so going back and forth between those things, especially after you've let's say activated that area for the chiral network, it becomes a lot easier, and so it becomes a lot more repetitious more quickly than a lot of other games. So that's kind of one of the reasons I don't like it. But I legit thought this game was gonna be 15 hours or so when I started reading reviews. Yeah, so that's one of the things that I thought was that like this game's gonna be like 5 hours long or something. It's gonna be a lot of cutscenes because, you know, it's from a new studio. They turned it around fairly quickly. So it was interesting to see that it was so large, actually. You can definitely make it 100 hours if you want, Gal Scott Moxie, but that seems like on the extreme higher end of stuff. And I apologize if I'm talking over a lot of this stuff, but it's pretty quiet right now, and you can find the first hour of Death Stranding elsewhere for sure. 40, 60, that sounds about right. Like 40 to 60 sounds like about right for like a completionist run. I definitely could have done more side missions, and I kind of made a big mistake of exploring a little bit too much. The chapter break, the episode breaks, I think, in this game are really strong. How satisfied are you with the overall explanation of what Death Stranding was and these are?
What the hell?
Didn't mean to grab you so hard.
At first, like,
Tears. I
hold
chiral
on.
allergy.
We'll just wait for this to go.
So, you have dooms, like me.
I've got the extinction factor, but I think you got me beat.
What's your level? You can see them, right?
No, but I can sense them.
Level 2, then.
What are you doing here?
Trying to stay dry. Same as you.
Hey, Squirtle.
Time falls let up. My name is Fragile.
Yeah, I've heard of you.
That right? Sam Porter Bridges. The man who delivers.
So, they explain what those things are. Like, they do talk about what the BTs are, what Death Stranding is. It's just that, like, it's all very, very silly. And I think a lot of the times, it's not so much that, like, the factual explanation for what those are bad. It's just that the way that a lot of the stuff is delivered and a lot of the cutscenes are like self-indulgent to a fault. I think there's like fun Kojima, and there's like really just like eye-rolling Kojima, and there's, to me, towards the end especially, there's a lot of eye-rolling Kojima, but there's mixed with some really strong fun Kojima, and like a surprising amount of like tender moments that I think actually work, and the overall tone and themes of the game, and like the message. I think that stuff stands out, like in both gameplay and the cutscenes, but there are a lot of really sloppy deliveries of a lot of things. So.
And on top of that, not much left of me either. Got soaked from neck to toe.
Someone said that this was the most well-acted video game of all time.
I make deliveries. That's all.
Do you agree with that, Koshin? I don't know. It's hard to say, but it's up there. I think I was a little kind of gun-shy on Leia at first, but she grew on me. It definitely feels, it's hard to know when, you know, there's a native French speaker, like how much of it is like good acting versus like, I don't know if she was giving a lot of strong direction, but she comes around. I ended up liking a lot of the characters purely for their performances. But I think there are certain characters that I think are underutilized, without saying too much. But I think Norman does a really good job. Who else is in this? Mr. Wending does a pretty good job at being a... Margaret Qualley, I think. Margaret Qualley is probably like... probably gets the MVP award.
But it can't wash everything away.
Because... for a lot of the characters who do a lot of exposition, they have sound alikes. So like Guillermo del Toro, reffing, I think they both have sound alikes. But I think Margaret Qualley does all of her own voice work, and a lot of that voice work is like exposition of like, here's how this thing works. Here's the level 2 version of this gun. It's gonna be different than this other gun. And she like, the way those lines are written and the way she delivers them, it's like they didn't have to do those lines particularly well, but she does them better than I think you might expect. And it's like, here's like a celebrity who, you know, I'm not sure how familiar she is with games, but like a celebrity who probably has not done a lot of video game voice work as far as I know, doing a pretty good job of explaining game systems to you. Right now I'm holding both triggers as I head downhill, because this is a fairly steep hill. So right there, you can see that I have to hold down the buttons to kind of avoid tripping. One other thing, right there. And if you bump in, you see those little marks. If you bump into stuff, you'll damage your cargo, which you don't want to do. I didn't realize. So another thing to point out is that, you know, keeping it the theme here, you can see when I scan, you see all the blue parts. Those are like parts that are fine to cross. The yellow parts is like, okay, you're gonna be waiting, you're gonna be slowed down a lot. Probably don't want to have a motorcycle if you're here. And then I'll see if I can. And the red parts are just straight up, you're gonna sink. And they dedicate a lot of stuff to that. You know, I can't get into, probably won't be able to get into too much of it here. But, you know, the fact that I'm basically holding both triggers right now, and you see my stamina kind of go down. Like, otherwise I'm going to get swept up into the river unless I hold both triggers. There's a physicality to that I really came to love. It's like it's probably my favorite part of the game. It's like the one part of the game that I can unequivocally like say, no, this is no holds barred. Like, this is really good. This feels fresh for an open world game. It's like really original, and they utilize this stuff well, and that is the main crux of the game. So it works really well for me. And I think that's gonna be the most divisive part, is how much do you want to consider, like, oh, I need to climb up that slope. Oh, but I have a motorcycle. I don't want to go up something that's super rocky, right? That is this game. And if you're not into that, then I can totally see why you'd kind of be left cold by it. The music in this game is very good. I think when I first saw, like, oh, he's got the band Low Roar, it just seems like, okay, here's Kojima kind of nursing his pet band that he likes. Like, whatever, I guess. But a part of me is like, for one, I think that I came around to Low Roar as a band, even though it's not usually my thing. They fit really well with the game, and I like that, I mentioned it in my review, I like that this game feels personal in a way that a lot of games don't. And I don't mean that, like, there's not, like, a super direct allegory. Well, you could probably contrive one. For, like, Kojima and, like, a lot of the Konami stuff. It's not super direct about that, but there's things like the song choices, the fact that he's casting people like Lindsay Wagner in a way that feels like, oh, this isn't like someone who's like, oh, we gotta capitalize on the popularity of Lindsay Wagner. It's just like, no, I watched The Bionic Woman when I was a kid, and I really like Lindsay Wagner, so I'm gonna have her in my game. Like, it feels really weird and self-indulgent, but that's like the good part of it. I want to say some of part or all of the game's soundtrack is actually on Spotify, but I don't know for sure. It's also interesting how, like, the fact that you're talking about cities, they talk a lot about cities later on, and you're connecting cities, but you don't really get to really see the implications of your actions on cities. So, like, that, as far as I'm concerned, this little sightline here is, like, evocative, but that's all it is. It's an evocative site. You do very little traversal in cities, and they're usually barren, which, could be a metaphor depending on whatever. But you don't do a lot of traveling in cities. It's mostly like countryside, but they do a pretty good job of varying it up, so it's not all gonna look like this. It's gonna look very similar, but they do a good job of diversifying the landscapes without sort of resorting to, like, here's the fire level, here's the ice level, here's the level with all the electric stuff in it. So. Yeah, and people are talking about how visually gorgeous it is, and that's true, but I think that, we take for granted how good games look, but I think this is a game where the sites that you're actually looking at are a significant part of the gameplay, I think, because when obviously this is like not super hard, but as you're taking on harder jobs across more difficult terrain, so here you can see that I'm kind of tilting I have to hold the left trigger but not the right trigger to balance myself. So as you do harder jobs and as you go up more treacherous areas, when you get to the top of a mountain, it feels like it means something. So when you're at the top, you're like, oh, cool. And you can drop down signs and stuff to let people know, like, where things are. But it's cool to see the top of a mountain and feel like you really earned it versus just like, oh, you go anywhere in a game and it's like you're going to be treated to a gorgeous view, I might just intentionally. So if you don't do that, if you don't balance yourself, you're gonna hurt. You're gonna end up botching things, and there will be areas where you want to deliver super fragile cargo, where me biting it there would have
You may select partial delivery to submit required cargo currently in your possession,
Oh, am I
and
missing one
return
of
with
them?
the remainder when convenient.
Okay, I was sorry. I was probably a
Once the
little too
cargo
busy.
submitted meets or exceeds requirements, you may designate the order complete at any time.
Okay, so I can deliver part of this cargo. Yeah. One minor thing that kind of bothered me are the menus. I feel like aren't super great. There's a lot of like hold X to confirm. Yeah, he has a lot of good lines. Flaming Queso says like he just says F me when he falls. He has a lot of good lines like that, that sound pretty natural and good. So you can deliver lost cargo, and a lot of it spawns from other users. You can have users return their things. I mean, you can red box it, yeah. It's probably a little too long for red boxing. Feel bad because now I'm gonna waste even more time on the same area. But I know where it is. Yeah. Shouldn't take too long. Where was I? Yeah, you can definitely try it and see if you like it after playing it for a few hours. But it's definitely not a game you're gonna be able to beat on a red box rental, probably. So it's not, the movement isn't like Red Dead slow. You do have a lot. You can sprint. It does feel gamey, right? It's not like a. It doesn't feel like a super gamey or like a super slow game where the narrative is king. But it is. It does want you to think about the terrain you're moving across, and I think that's really cool. I'd be interested to see if there does end up being a demo at one point, but I think this is one of those games where, the mystique behind it is like, oh, you have to see it for yourself. I think they're still banking on that for a lot of their promotions. So I could definitely see them not wanting to release a demo until later on.
Thank you.
So you can see there the objective in case you're lost. You can always see that icon at the center of the screen. Like, it's not... Navigation is kind of a thing insofar as you're trying to... So let me pull up the map here. I don't have the map yet. Okay. That's fine. You can pull up the map and plot out your course, because the game doesn't have, like... it doesn't really ping you and say, like, hey, go here, go here. Because part of it is trying to figure out your own journey through things. But the map does help, and it'll always show you where you're supposed to go, but it's really up to you to see, like, oh, this path is through a river, I should probably go around, or there's a cliff there, I should probably map around it. You can do that.
What took you so long? It's not like the legend to come in late.
Had to wait out the storm. Lost my bike.
Sounds like you've been through the ringer. Luckily, our goods are in perfect condition. Well, you did keep us waiting, but everything else seems to be in perfect order, so great work. We'll be awaiting the next delivery.
How did I make that banner? This is probably only for this stream, but there's that... Kojima released that poster, that is like a movie, it's like a film poster, because, that's what you do when you're Kojima. And I basically grabbed that photo and just kind of blew it up. I won't be using it for anything else. It's not going to be like my default banner, but it's a nice image, and I thought it'd look good on the background here. And so you see the stats. So certain deliveries are marked with certain stats, and those will improve. Like delivery time is the one you're going to want to get the most of, and that increases your stamina. I think it increases your run speed, but I'm not totally sure. But these will all give you bonuses. Like I think delivery volume increases the amount of cargo you can carry, like as a human being. Because you can get like power skeletons and stuff that may let you equip more ammo.
Special commission for Sam Porter Bridges. Priority 1.
Yeah, I might actually reach out to Mr. Muffin about a banner, but I basically woke up and realized today, like, oh, right, I'm streaming Death Stranding, like I promised I would. So let me get these cool vehicles here. And the absurdity of this vehicle actually makes sense in that it's really that vehicle. It can lower, and that's meant to help that particular vehicle cross rivers. And you do get to drive this vehicle. Well, not that
Igor,
exactly,
Bridges
but
corpse disposal.
a vehicle eventually.
Sam Porter, I presume? Right. Not the touchy-feely type. Document said you had some kind of phobia.
Bridges corpse disposal? What happened?
Look, gotta get a move on. I'll explain as we go.
DTS Killer Dark says, what are your thoughts on whether or not it takes 10 plus hours to get fun? I feel like I clicked with it pretty quickly. I'm not entirely sure. I can suspect what they mean when they say that. But I even like the simple early deliveries I thought were fun as a way of getting you up to speed. It is, I don't want to say slow, but it does introduce concepts one by one. So your early climbs are like pretty simple, and it's like, hey, use a ladder, use a climbing anchor to get through this part of the world. So they're kind of low key, but I think the basic climbing mechanics I found pretty fun.
He wasn't quarantined.
I will say though, like if you're playing, like let's say you're like 4 hours into it and you're not liking the climbing and stuff, I don't think it gets like significantly more. I don't think it turns into a totally different game. Because I think what most people are gonna point to is like, oh, eventually you get guns, and that's when the game gets fun. And I think the game gets markedly worse when you get guns. So I'm not. I don't necessarily abide by the idea that this game takes a while to get going. I think you either come to terms with what it is immediately, or it just takes you longer to do that.
Hey,
so
we can do this. We just need someone like you with dooms.
Well, he's already in the first stages of necrosis. If we don't hurry, this place is a crater.
So how about it? Can we count on you? Then Bridges hereby enters into a contract with Sam Porter.
Sam. Just Sam. And I can't spot BTs. Just sense them.
That's why we came prepared.
A bridge baby, huh?
see again, like with The Witcher 3, that was a game that I liked
We'll be able to stay
from
one
the
step
get-go.
ahead
So
of them.
I don't know. I don't think there are a ton of games. I think the only game that it's like that drastically changes
Makes me feel
as it
like
goes
shit every
along,
time.
I feel like is Final Fantasy 13. That's a game where when you get 30 hours in, it drastically opens up in a way that it doesn't before then. So I can totally see that, people thinking that about Final Fantasy 13. But I think most games they're not coy about what they are up front. Like this, the game that you saw, just now there are more tools introduced. There are different landscapes. The story obviously gets a little bit more interesting. But that's what the game is. If I read the Witcher books, would I care more about Witcher 3? I read the books after I played Witcher 3, but I'd already played Witcher 1 and 2, so I can't really answer your question about that.
The world was different when I was a kid. America was a country. Anybody could go anywhere they damn well pleased. No need for couriers like yourself. We had highways, airplanes. Hell, you could even visit other countries. Hard to imagine it now. As you can see, the Death Stranding poked us full of holes.
So one thing I do want to say is that as much exposition there is, I think they do a pretty good job of actually like integrating into the world.
Timefall came and washed you away.
This is even still a little bit like Sam knows about the Timefall. Sam knows about the world. It feels a little weird that he's explaining it to him, but it's not like, hey, sit down, we're gonna explain this concept.
Cities, couriers like yourself got put up on a pedestal. Son of a bitch. Rainbow!
How much further to the incinerator?
Okay, so, I mean, I used to be that person where I would want to give games another shot, but it's like, there are so many games, just play one you like, Witcher 3 is one of my favorite games of all time, but if you played that game for 8 hours and don't like Geralt, it doesn't get better, like, Like I don't know that I've had too many games where I went back through a second time and thought too much better of them. But I guess maybe there is an example at some point that I forget. But there's so many games now that you like going into a game you kind of already know you dislike, just to hope that it gets better, and to hope that you meet the consensus. You know.
The engine stalled.
It's like
Castle's
such
got us
a
right where they want us.
risky
Get us
investment.
out of here.
But
Sam, can you see anything?
No, nothing.
yeah, you don't really have to kill anybody. Well, you do. But for the most part, you can't. Like, they just straight up. They don't even like bother to really differentiate those weapons too much. There is like one big thing that you want to. There is a reason to use lethal weapons, but against humans, they just straight up have like lethal, non-lethal, and they feel like about the same when you're shooting them at human targets. So if you don't want to kill anybody, you may as well you may as well use the non-lethal option if you're that kind of player. Okay, I can turn down. Let me know how that is. I turned the game audio down. Let me know if that works. I also think that was a particularly loud scene. Okay, cool. So I think this if you've seen some of the trailers, you've probably seen this scene. Did you have a hard time separating actors from characters? I think Ritas and Guillermo del Toro, I think, are the only ones where I had that. Like, I know Mads Mikkelsen, but I haven't seen him in enough movies to be like, oh, that's that guy from that thing, right? I mostly just know him like, oh, that's Mads Mikkelsen from posts people make on Twitter. I will say it does feel like Norman Reedus is like trying to do. If he feels like an alternate version of Snake, because it feels like Norman Reedus trying to do a more gravelly version of his own voice. They also do a pretty good job of implementing this kind of thing into the game, the whole handprints walking on stuff, in a way that feels like a good input of like, oh, I want to keep an eye on those footsteps, which I think the stealth, the way they kind of work stealth into the game, I think is actually one of the more clever things the game does. You think we will ever see Kojima direct a movie since Flaming Kenso? I mean, they literally mentioned, right, in that Kotaku story that they want to make films after this, which would be interesting to see. I don't know that it. Maybe I didn't communicate it extra well, but like the stealth, like with the BTs. So it's hard to pin down sort of exactly. So against human opponents, stealth is unnecessary. Like running into what are called mule camps, you can just do whatever. But against BTs, that's where the stealth actually is like important and works. So maybe that's what you read there. So like trying to evade the BTs, that part I think works really well. But when you're trying to, let's say, infiltrate camps of human opponents, you go loud almost immediately, and it doesn't really matter. This makes me wish the skulls in MGS5 had been done a lot better. Yeah, the bosses in Metal Gear Solid 5 are like the worst part, I think. Kind of the case here too, to be honest. There's a couple bosses that I think are pretty good, but a lot of the later ones I don't like. I do like in Metal Gear Solid 5 though that you can straight up just skip one of the bosses. Like, there's the part where you are kind of being attacked by the skull units near that mansion, and I just snuck around them. Like it was honestly like one of my favorite parts of that game. I do mention in my review, like, the game does play with a lot of, like, really cool, evocative imagery, and I think this is, like, one of those moments early on, especially, where, like, it ultimately doesn't matter whether the story makes sense in a lot of ways, because it elicits the right emotions when it needs to. And which isn't to say, like, the story is nonsensical, it's just dense in a way that makes it feel really plotting and kind of a slog to just understand. The post-apocalypse stuff is pretty well-worn. Adam Walker, Texas Ranger, yeah, but I never got the sense that this feels like a story that's already been done. But there are elements. I would have to talk spoilers to elucidate what I mean. So yeah, like I said, like stuff like this I think is really cool. And it does ultimately speak to the game's message. I, don't want to spoil stuff, but it does work as a way to reinforce some of the themes. It doesn't come off as just like, oh, here's Kojima being very random. This part though I'm not as into. Like the whole like, here's someone kind of ASMR singing like a fairy, or not like a fairy tale, like a lullaby. That's the thing you see in horror movies so often, and so like there wasn't anything creepy or like evocative about that particular moment for me, because it happens a few times, and it's just like I don't want to watch this like horror movie trailer, because that's all horror movie trailers do. I want more low roar, less lullabies. Yeah, Gal's got Moxie. If you are interested in picking up the game, I think if you heard me ramble on about the game and are interested in seeing kind of that gameplay unfurl, I think that is cool. But definitely keep in mind that this is a lot like Metal Gear Solid 5 in that this is like them up front, like putting a lot of the cutscenes up front. So your next like major like pivotal plot moments are gonna be between like an hour or two or several hours of the gameplay that you saw at the beginning, you know.
Can you hear me? Steady.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I think reactions to this game will be a lot more mixed once it actually hits stores. Because I think a lot of people who were reviewing the game, you know, it's always to some degree a self-selecting group of people who are like, I'd be interested in seeing what Kojima does next, right? So I think the game will be somewhat divisive, but yeah, I think when people kind of call this like a walking simulator, things like that, they mean it as like a derisive term, but like I really got into that concept. I remember, you know, being really into it at the beginning.
Bang which gave rise to life as we know it. And then came the next explosion.
I mean, it is like yeah. I mean, a lot of games are fetch quest games, right? Even I've been playing like a lot of Outer Worlds, and that game is a fetch quest game. Like in that you are going from okay, go here, go here, go here, go here. But it's like, you know, the stuff you do in between those moments. Like you can reduce a lot of games to that. But I think the fact that, you know, this makes it a little bit more central in that literally the point, both thematically and gameplay wise, is to bring one object to another person. I think that shouldn't diminish like what I think they've accomplished here in making the world feel like a playground in this kind of the same way that Breath of the Wild did. Not to say that there's not a ton of surprises in the world that I found, but maybe I just didn't look very thoroughly. But it does feel like you are playing a game that involves the land you're walking on, which I think is a thing that a lot of games don't really feel like a desire to do, and which I think this game actually does pretty well. So I mean, I feel like it's definitely not, you know, Devil May Cry, where that game doesn't have any fetch quests. It's just you're going through from level to level. But I think a lot of open world games have you do fetch quests, and I think fetch quests ultimately come down to you are heading from one point to another to get a thing for somebody, right? Like it's the context that matters. How is the combat? This is Digastic. I don't like it is rare enough that it's not a problem, but when it does happen, it's like the least interesting part of the game to me. Like the shooting is pretty rote. It's like, hey, here's an assault rifle, here's a pistol, here's a shotgun. You know, left trigger aims, right trigger shoots when you have a shotgun equipped. Yeah, those parts are like the least interesting parts to me, but they work. You know, it's not like they're bad. It's just
not like you, of course. Contrary to the name, I've never actually died.
And like melee combat is pretty is kind of disappointing in that you're really just mashing the square button a lot. There's not a whole lot of nuance to melee.
See?
So I'm a prisoner.
Yeah, there are some creative ways to take people down. Like it does have, you know, Metal Gear Solid's like different like smoke bombs and things like that. You can you can try playing it stealthy. There's like grenades and stuff that you can use,
Us.
but
Yep.
yeah, you kind of have to
Ages.
like. The game never
Humanity's
pushes you
best
or
hope
ever like
for the future.
makes that
Or
interesting
avoiding extinction,
without you
if you
trying to
prefer.
do it yourself.
Right.
Um,
Where am I? What time
so
is it?
if you just want to like get
Watch
through
me.
stuff, it's pretty boring.
Try
But
pressing
and you
it
do have to
against
make
your
it fun on
skin,
your own, which
like
to
this.
me always feels like a flaw. It's like if you have to go out of your way to make combat interesting in something, I feel like
That just means
they've
you
kind of
got
failed
the
at making it
connection
interesting
to
in the
the
first place.
courtroom.
If you have to do so much work to
Look,
make it
look.
good.
Cuffs will watch over you 24 hours a day. That is to say, we will. We're here to help.
What the hell? 2 days.
During that time,
Yeah.
we took the liberty of collecting.
Yeah, like I said
samples
earlier,
from you.
as a whole, the game isn't hard.
You're a repatriate.
I got
makes
S
you
ranks on most of the
very
missions
special.
without really trying.
What happened to the
And the few
city,
that I
guys?
did get Haze on, I kind of knew.
Central
Because I'd
Knock
messed
was
up or done something
obliterated
stupid, you know?
in the annihilation. Game over, man. Place is a crater. The only ones to get it continue were you, for obvious reasons, and your broken bridge baby.
Is it all right?
It's been marked for disposal. Didn't work anymore. Why keep it? We lost everything.
Yeah, I would even go as far as to say
Not
like
just
if
corpse
if you're
disposal.
interested in getting through the game as fast as possible and not making it this huge investment,
HQ,
I would just say go on
all
very
credit
easy
for it.
and just
Every
like,
soul in Central Knot City.
you know, don't do any side missions.
We're at our
Because
base.
I think the main
in
crux of the
Capital
game, which is
Knot City
climbing
now.
a mountain, you know,
Or
basically
should I say,
to be reductive,
our new headquarters.
is still intact at that point,
Not bad
and
scene.
you don't get a lot of the like,
logical
well, I have to
choice.
do all these quests so I can have enough resources to do this
But
other quest.
our implementation
So that stuff
team
goes
has
away
been
pretty
decimated.
completely, and I think
There's
that
only
if
so
you're interested,
much
like
they
that,
can
that's a
do
pretty good
in
way to
2
enjoy it.
days. Things here are a mess. Fortunately, the director and his support team were out of town at the time.
I will say, I wonder
so the
if
chain of command
the lack of good lip
remains
syncing is
intact.
maybe on my end. I don't know if the stream audio is delayed a little bit. I've always had issues with that, but
I hate to do this
Um,
so soon, but I have a job.
I, for the most part, thought like the lip syncing worked pretty well. Like the acting in general, you know, the facial stuff is, I think is pretty
This
good.
stencil is from when you repatriated? What's the other mark from?
A clingy woman in a cave.
Cali 8, are you planning on building bridges and helping other players out? Yeah, I mean, I did. I definitely
see.
built bridges and
Half
put ladders down, but
phasmophobia.
I honestly got to the game a
No
little
wonder
later
you
than a
were
lot of
out
other
there
reviewers.
alone, where no one could touch
And
you.
so whenever I was like, here's a very crucial cliff
tried to be
that
more
you're gonna have to
careful, Sam.
get across, there was already a bridge
So,
there. So people were more
my job
helping
is an
me,
urgent delivery.
but there were a few interesting times when I
I
was
need
able to
you
help
bring
people,
the president some
which is cool.
morphine.
And I think that's a very
What
crucial
president?
part of the game. I think
America's
is
gone.
the social element and seeing
Talking
stuff
about
that
the
other people
mayor
have
of
laid
Central
down.
Knock.
It feels like the first
No,
successful
not the
iteration
mayor.
on the Dark Souls
America
leaving
lives
notes
on,
behind
Sam.
for people, and you can do that
The
too.
president is in the
But
final
you know, seeing
stages
someone
of
else's
cancer.
vehicle, seeing someone else's
In
bridge,
critical
seeing someone
condition.
else's base is like a cool
There's
like,
still time.
oh, thank God someone's here.
Why me?
Thank God I'm connected to somebody. Like I love that I have the internet, you know. Honestly,
Do
like
as
the
I
way
ask, and I
the actual
promise it
hard
will
mode in this
all
game
make
would be to
sense.
play without
Why don't you do it?
an internet connection, because then you don't see other players' objects. Which is like a
Because
huge
I'm
part of
likely here.
going back to the same area multiple times, is seeing other people's bridges to make the second and third
Apologies.
time you're out in an
This is
area
just
a lot
chiropractor.
easier.
And here, come the tears. Allergic reaction to the chiral transmission. I'm actually over in the isolation ward in the big triangle building. Here is the morphine.
Yeah, LA Noire is.
Bridges
It kind of looks
hereby
rough, like the actual
enters into a
textures and stuff look kind of rough now,
contract
but
with Sam Porter.
that was a game that really blew me away with how like
What's this about? Tell me the
realistic a lot of the facial movements and stuff in that game looked.
The truth, Sam. is
And
that
apparently that
America's
was
last
such a hard
president
endeavor that
wants
it
to
broke
see
the whole
you in
studio,
person.
so maybe not easy to
Are you
replicate.
really about to say no?
I think, this was a lot of cutscenes, but I mostly was kind of using it as a way for you guys to ask me questions, and it seems like we got that out of the way. I feel like I was able to explain the game, I was able to kind of sewage or, talk over any doubts, or not talk over, but like talk through any doubts that people might have had. Yeah, the EA Circuit is.
Very good.
I think it's. I
I'll
think
see
that
you
and the
in the
Travolta stuff put
isolation
together,
ward.
I think, are what make this game. I don't. I think that I didn't really click with the story. There are some of the things it's trying to get across. I think came through, but it takes such a ham-handed approach to delivering those things that it dulls the impact of a lot of its better moments. Um, but overall, I do like it. I gave it an 8, and it's weird because it's like it's the score that felt right when I scored it, but it's like I would say it's a strong 8. So I think this will likely make it onto my top 10 list for the year. But it's there like even I know that reviews are a subjective thing, but I also feel like I wouldn't have felt comfortable giving this game a 9 and the recommendation that that entails as a review. But anyway, one thing I did want to show off is like I think a good illustration of what it is that like so you have to hold down the right trigger to grab an object, right? And so as long as I'm holding the object, once I let go of the trigger, it lets go of the object. And then if you press square, which I don't think it will let me do here. If you press square, you can swing the case.
Check the map on your cufflinks if you're lost, Sam.
So my problem with this character is that he does so much exposition, and I don't.
If you're not sure how to get there, you
I
can
think
set
he's
one
like the
person
worst
to
voice actor in a game of really, to be fair, really strong voice acting. He's probably my least favorite actor. Let's see if I can get out of here. No, it won't let me, because you can't attack things while you're in a safe zone, but you can swing it, and then if you let go, after pressing the square button, you'll throw the case, and that's cool.
Sam, your friendly neighborhood dead man here. If you want to confirm you're headed the right way, check your compass. It'll never steer you wrong. Provided you have a destination, that is.
You can see that, and you know it's not usually too hard to find exactly where you're supposed to go, but getting there is obviously the hard
wasn't
part.
just home to Bridges HQ. It was also the seat of the Reconstructionist movement. If the president hadn't required special treatment, she would have never left.
I don't want to get in there because it leads to another really long cutscene. But one thing I do want to point out is that like I mentioned this in the review, but there is this really strong theme of like nature versus man in the game, and one way that manifests is that you see most of the cities, and the implication is that they're populated, but they're really barren when you're here. Like this is maybe one of 2, maybe 3, depending on what you count, times when you're really in a city, and those are like barren. Like there's no real human interaction here, so there's not a whole lot of actual talking with people. So anyway, I do want to get back to some of the work I've been doing recently, but tomorrow I'll be back with Oracle of Seasons. But one quick announcement is that, as I mentioned, I am starting to do some part-time work that I actually don't know if I can mention it, but so these streams will probably get moved to a different time zone unless people feel really strongly about keeping them here. Like the hours are pretty flexible, but let me know what you think, both in the chat and on Twitter. What you think? Do you think that doing an afternoon stream, like around, let's say 7 Central, would work better for you if you'd still watch, things like that? But I am probably gonna have to move there for a little while, for a couple months at least. But it's not really, it's like contract work, but it's not, it's not a long-term thing. So yeah, I'm gonna sign off here, but let me know what you think about a later stream, something around 7 Central, or if you'd prefer a morning stream, something like that. But definitely willing to consider stuff, but it might be the way I have to go for work stuff. All right, well, yeah, hopefully that answered questions about Death Stranding. Hopefully it either kind of said no, that you either now know better whether or not you actually want to play the game or not. If you did, maybe it assuaged your doubts, but yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. This is one of my higher rated streams, so I definitely appreciate it. So see you guys later. Bye.